Hi, Guy. Tonight we journey back to the heart of ancient Persia. Not to the battlefield, but to something far more fragrant. Imagine a royal horse-breeding ranch, sun rising over the Zagros Mountains, and the, shall we say, distinctive aroma of equine excellence. You probably won't survive this olfactory onslaught, by the way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's oddly comforting knowing someone in Vladivostok is also listening to horse facts at 3 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are a stable hand at one of the vast horse ranches supplying the royal cavalry. Sunrise in Persia, 530 BCE, and the horses are already making their presence known. Literally. The first sliver of sun crests the jagged peaks of the Zagros Mountains, painting the eastern sky in hues of rose and gold. But you barely notice. You're too busy mucking out stalls. The pungent aroma of horse manure, a familiar if not entirely pleasant greeting to the day. The snorting and stamping of hundreds of horses fills the air, a percussive symphony punctuated by the occasional whinny. The ground vibrates beneath your sandaled feet, a constant reminder of the immense power contained within these magnificent creatures. Dust motes dance in the shafts of sunlight that pierce the open-air stable. You squint, wiping a bead of sweat from your brow. It's going to be another scorcher. Already, the heat is radiating off the packed earth, promising a long, arduous day. You grab a pitchfork and attack the next stall, the rhythmic scrape of metal against stone. A small comfort in the face of the monumental task ahead. This particular stall belongs to a spirited young stallion, his dark coat gleaming even in the dim light. He paws the ground impatiently, snorting plumes of warm air. You offer him a conciliatory pat on the neck and a handful of barley, hoping to appease him while you finish cleaning. These aren't just any horses, you see. These are Nisaeans. Fact. The Nisaean breed of horses, raised on these royal estates, were prized throughout the ancient world for their size and strength. Think Clydesdales, but faster, more agile, and bred for war. These magnificent beasts were the backbone of the Persian cavalry, feared and respected from the steppes of Scythia to the sands of Egypt. Their powerful legs could carry a fully armored soldier for miles, their endurance legendary. Imagine the sight of hundreds of these war horses charging across the battlefield, a thundering wave of muscle and sinew. It's no wonder the Persian Empire stretched so far and wide. You move on to the next stall, this one occupied by a mare and her foal. The foal, barely a few weeks old, nuzzles its mother, its soft whickers a counterpoint to the deeper rumbles of the stallions. You smile, a rare moment of tenderness in the midst of the hard labor. Even in this environment of constant activity and, let's be honest, overwhelming smells, there are moments of pure beauty. The bond between mare and foal, the raw power of the stallions, the sheer scale of the operation. It's all a testament to the importance of horses in ancient Persian society. You pause in your work, catching a whiff of something different. It's a pungent, almost acrid smell, layered over the ever-present aroma of manure. You glance around, trying to pinpoint the source. Ah, there it is. One of the older grooms is applying leather wraps to the hooves of a horse preparing for a long journey. Quirky tidbit. Horseshoes weren't invented yet, but some Persians wrapped their horses' hooves in leather for protection during long journeys. Imagine the smell. Yeah, not great. Think a combination of wet dog and, well, you get the idea. It's effective, no doubt, preventing the horse's hooves from cracking and splitting on the rough terrain. But it definitely adds another layer to the already complex olfactory landscape of the royal ranch. The sun continues its ascent, casting long shadows across the stable yard. The other stable hands are busy with their own tasks, feeding, grooming, exercising the horses. The air buzzes with activity, a sense of purpose driving everyone forward. This is more than just a job. It's a vital contribution to the strength and prestige of the Persian Empire. These horses are more than just animals. They are instruments of war, symbols of power, and a source of national pride. As you work, you can't help but wonder about the wider role of horses in Persian society. Debate. Historians still argue whether the Persians used horses solely for warfare or also for sport and leisure. I'm guessing polo with pomegranates was involved. I mean, wouldn't that be amazing? Picture it. Teams of skilled riders, their horses adorned with colorful tassels and plumes, racing across a field, whacking a pomegranate with mallets. It sounds ridiculous, but also kind of awesome. Whether it actually happened or not, it's fun to imagine the Persians enjoying the athleticism and grace of their horses in a less martial setting. The sun climbs higher, the heat intensifying. The work becomes more arduous, the smells more pungent. But you carry on, driven by a sense of duty and a strange sort of pride. You are a part of something important, something bigger than yourself. You are a cog in the mighty machine of the Persian Empire, and these magnificent horses are the engine that drives it forward. And, hey, at least you have a story to tell. Just try not to breathe through your nose too much. The pre-dawn chill bit at my exposed skin, making me pull my robe tighter, the rough wool scratching against my neck. A familiar ache pulsed in my feet, those blasted leather horsehoof wraps. I swear they shrunk in the night. Each step was a reminder of yesterday's marathon mucking out session. I trudged towards the royal stables, the rhythmic crunch of gravel under my worn boots, the only sound besides my own breathing. Lanterns flickered in the growing light, casting long, dancing shadows that stretched and shrunk with every step. Already, the air was alive with the sounds of the stables, the rhythmic swishing of brushes, the clinking of buckets, the low murmur of grooms talking to their charges. The horses themselves added to the chorus, their knickers and impatient stamps echoing through the stone archways. The smell, though, well, let's just say it was a potent mix of hay, manure, and horse sweat. Definitely an acquired taste. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors of the main stable, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the scene was organized chaos. Grooms moved with practiced efficiency, their movements almost a dance as they weaved between the stalls. Some were already grooming their assigned horses, the rhythmic rasp of brushes against coats, a soothing sound. Others hefted heavy sacks of grain, their muscles straining under the weight. The horses themselves were a restless lot, their heads bobbing over the stall doors, their velvet noses sniffing the air, eager for their morning meal. These weren't just any horses. These were the royal Nisaean steeds, the pride of the empire. Bred for their speed, endurance, and intelligence, they were as much a symbol of the emperor's power as his golden throne. Each horse was a magnificent specimen, their coats gleaming like polished jewels, their muscles rippling beneath their skin. They held themselves with an air of regal dignity, their dark eyes intelligent and watchful. These horses weren't just livestock, they were practically royalty themselves. Each one had a name, a meticulously recorded lineage that stretched back generations, and, if I'm being honest, a distinct personality. There was Zephyr, a fiery chestnut mare who tolerated no fools and would nip at anyone who dared to approach her without the proper respect. Then there was Apollo, a magnificent white stallion with a flowing mane and tail, who seemed to believe he was a god among horses, demanding constant attention and admiration. And let's not forget Hera, a sleek black mare with an attitude as sharp as her hooves. She had a habit of pinning her ears back and giving a warning snort to anyone who dared to interrupt her while she was eating. And the pampering? Don't even get me started. These horses ate better than most people I knew. Their diet consisted of the finest grains, imported hay, and a special blend of herbs, said to enhance their performance. They were groomed daily, their coats brushed until they shone, their hooves meticulously cleaned and oiled. Their stalls were spotless, lined with fresh straw and meticulously raked. They even had their own personal blankets, embroidered with their names and the royal crest. It's true what they say about Persian nobles and their war horses. They treated them like members of the family, forming close bonds that went beyond mere ownership. I'd overheard stories of emperors whispering secrets into their steeds' ears, trusting them with information they wouldn't share with their own advisors. I'd even seen some of the horses adorned with elaborate tack, inlaid with precious stones and intricate carvings. And then there was the tiara incident. I could have sworn I saw Princess Amara placing a tiny, glittering tiara on the head of her favorite mare Luna just yesterday. I blinked a few times, thinking I'd imagined it, but no. There it was, perched jauntily on Luna's forelock, catching the light with every toss of her head. Luna, for her part, seemed to take the adornment in stride, tossing her head with even more regal flair than usual. Working in the royal stables wasn't just a job, it was an education in the intricate relationship between humans and animals. It was a constant reminder of the power and majesty of these magnificent creatures, and the respect they commanded. Even the most hardened warrior would soften his gaze when looking at these horses, their voices dropping to a gentle murmur as they spoke to their mounts. It was a privilege to be a part of their world, even if it meant sore feet and the constant smell of horse manure. But as I watched the grooms tending to their charges, a strange feeling crept over me. It was as though the horses were communicating with them, not through words, but through subtle shifts in posture, the flick of an ear, the soft nicker in the back of their throat. It was almost as if they were whispering secrets, sharing confidences that only those attuned to their language could understand. The Nisian whisperers, they were sometimes called, these grooms who seemed to have a special connection with the royal steeds. I wondered if, one day, I too might learn to understand their silent language, to decipher the secrets they held within their intelligent eyes. For now, though, I was content to simply observe, to learn, and to marvel at the majesty of these incredible creatures. The air hung thick and heavy, a swirling concoction of hay dust motes dancing in the slivers of sunlight that pierced the stable's gloom. The sweet, grassy scent of the hay was undeniably present, a comforting, pastoral aroma. Layered over that, however, was the unmistakable tang of horse sweat, earned honestly from hours of training and exercise. And then there was the other element, the one you'd rather not dwell on, the one that curled your nostrils and made your eyes water slightly. It wasn't jasmine, that much was certain. It was the pungent, earthy, inescapable aroma of horse manure. The constant battle against the inevitable. Even royalty, with all their finery and power, couldn't escape the basic earthy realities of biology. And in the royal stables, that reality manifested itself in a never-ending supply of evidence. My pitchfork, surprisingly heavy in my hands, became an extension of my own arm. Mucking out stalls wasn't simply a matter of scooping and dumping, it was an art form, a delicate dance of strategic maneuvering and precise movements. The pitchfork plunged into the straw, lifting the soiled bedding and tossing it into the waiting wheelbarrow. The shovel came into play for the more compact deposits, scraping against the stone floor with a satisfying, if somewhat unromantic, rontvuk scritch. The trick was to work efficiently, minimizing the time spent inhaling the potent stable air while simultaneously avoiding any surprises. Stepping in the wrong place could ruin your day, your week, possibly even your month. It was a hazard of the job, a constant reminder of the unglamorous side of court life, no matter how close to the king you might be. The routine was relentless. Empty the stalls, replace the soiled straw with fresh, fragrant bedding, sweep the aisles, and then repeat, over and over. It was a Sisyphean task, a constant cycle of cleaning and replenishing. The horses, magnificent creatures of muscle and grace, seemed oblivious to the effort involved in maintaining their living quarters. They munched contentedly on their hay, their powerful flanks quivering occasionally, their large, liquid eyes observing the world with a serene indifference. They were royalty too, in their own way. And royalty, equine or human, expected a certain level of comfort. The stable hands, a motley crew of weathered faces and calloused hands, worked with a practiced efficiency born of long experience. There was a quiet camaraderie amongst them, a shared understanding of the less than glamorous aspects of their profession. Jokes were cracked, stories exchanged, all while the rhythmic scraping of shovels and the rustling of straw formed a constant background symphony. We were the unsung heroes of the royal court, the guardians of equine comfort, the silent custodians of, well, you know. It wasn't just about cleanliness, although that was certainly a significant factor. Unclean stables bred disease, attracted vermin, and generally created an unhealthy environment. And unhealthy horses, as any experienced stable hand would tell you, led to unhappy kings. A king without his warhorse was like a knight without his sword. He was vulnerable, exposed, and decidedly grumpy. And no one, absolutely no one, wanted a grumpy king. So we toiled, we sweated, we held our breath, and we kept the stables clean. For the good of the horses, the good of the kingdom, and, Perhaps most importantly, for the good of our own noses. The thought of ancient Persia suddenly drifted into my mind. I'd recently overheard a scholar discussing the elaborate plumbing systems in some of their royal stables. Apparently, they had sophisticated drainage systems designed specifically to channel away the evidence. Imagine ancient plumbing. While we toiled with pitchforks and shovels, they had engineered solutions to the same problem centuries ago. It was a humbling, if slightly amusing, realization. Here we were, in the heart of a supposedly advanced kingdom, still relying on manual labor to deal with a problem that the Persians had tackled with ingenuity and foresight. It made you think. Perhaps there was more to learn from the past than just the names of long-dead kings and the dates of forgotten battles. Perhaps there were practical lessons to be learned, lessons that could make the daily grind of mucking out stalls a little less fragrant. But for now, the pitchfork beckoned, the wheelbarrow awaited, and the horses, oblivious to the complexities of ancient plumbing and the musings of a humble stable hand, continued to contribute to the ongoing battle against the inevitable. The battle of manure and majesty. Did you hear old man Tiber talking about that fisherman he met at the marketplace? Baruch's voice, hushed with a conspiratorial thrill, drifted over the rhythmic swish of the horsebrush against leather. Caspian grunted, more focused on coaxing the tangles from his own horse's mane. Tiber talks to everyone. Probably half of what he says sprung full-grown from his imagination. No, this was different, Baruch insisted, setting down his brush. He swore on his mother's grave. And you know how Tiber is about his mother. That this fisherman had come straight from Hormuz, with tales wilder than a desert djinn. Caspian's interest piqued. Hormuz, you say? What kind of tales? Fish tales, mostly, Baruch chuckled. But not the kind you'd expect. This fisherman apparently nets beasts out in the Gulf big enough to feed an entire chariot racing team. Said one fish could fill a whole wagon, Caspian snorted. Right, and I'm the emperor's nephew. Baruch grinned, unfazed. That's what I said, but Tiber swore he saw the nets with his own eyes. Thick ropes as wide as my arm. Said the fisherman had hands like tree trunks and a beard that reached his knees. Looked like Neptune himself, only more sunbaked. And how, Caspian asked, his skepticism laced with a hint of amusement, does this supposed sea god haul these leviathans onto land? Baruch shrugged. That's the part Tiber couldn't quite explain. Said something about a system of pulleys and a team of oxen, and maybe some sort of magic. I figure the old man's mind was wandering a bit there. Magic, Caspian scoffed. Right, I suppose he also claimed these fish sing enchanted songs and grant wishes? No, Baruch admitted, but he did say they tasted like heaven kissed by fire. Apparently, the scales shimmer with all the colors of a sunset, and the flesh is, well, Tiber got a bit poetic at that point, started talking about ambrosia and the nectar of the gods. Made me hungry, though. The image of a fish, large enough to feed a chariot racing team, shimmering with the colors of a sunset, lodged itself in Caspian's mind. He could almost taste it, succulent and flavorful, grilled over an open fire. There's got to be a good seafood restaurant in Hormuz, Caspian mused aloud, more to himself than to Baruch. He knew the city was a hub of trade, a melting pot of cultures and goods flowing in from across the known world. Spices from India, silks from the east, precious stones from the mountains, all passed through Hormuz. Surely, amongst all that, there had to be at least one establishment dedicated to the bounty of the sea. He imagined a bustling kitchen, the air thick with the aroma of grilling fish, spices, and herbs, the clang of pots and pans a vibrant symphony against the backdrop of lively conversation. He pictured platters piled high with exotic seafood, glistening under the warm glow of oil lamps, served to merchants and sailors, weary travelers, and wealthy nobles. Perhaps even the fisherman himself, boasting about his latest catch, holding court amidst a crowd of captivated listeners. A restaurant? Baruch blinked, momentarily thrown by Caspian's sudden shift in thought. You're thinking about food now? Caspian shrugged, returning to the task of grooming his horse. Well, it's nearly midday, and all this talk of giant fish has given me an appetite. Speaking of food, Baruch said, glancing towards the sun, shouldn't we be heading back to camp? The cook threatened to feed us nothing but dates and hardtack if we were late for the midday meal. The thought of a bland meal of dates and hardtack solidified Caspian's yearning for something more substantial. He could almost taste the salty tang of the sea, the flaky texture of perfectly grilled fish, the subtle heat of exotic spices. The fisherman's outlandish tales, while likely exaggerated, had planted a seed of culinary curiosity. He knew, with a sudden certainty, that he had to experience the seafood of Hormuz for himself. "You know," he said to Baruch as they led their horses back towards the camp, "I've always wanted to see Hormuz. It's a city of legend, they say." Baruch raised an eyebrow. "Legend in fish stories, apparently." Caspian smiled. "Perhaps. But even if the fishermen's tales are half true, it sounds like a place worth visiting. Imagine the market stalls piled high with the freshest catches, the scent of the sea mingling with the aromas of spices from distant lands. And a restaurant," Baruch added, catching on to Caspian's train of thought, "serving fish big enough to feed a chariot racing team." They shared a laugh, the image of the gargantuan fish returning to their minds. Even if the reality of Hormuz didn't quite live up to the fishermen's embellished stories, the prospect of experiencing the city's culinary delights was enticing enough. The journey, Caspian decided, would be worth it, even if only to satisfy the craving that the fisherman's fantastical tale had ignited within him. He could almost taste the sea, the spices, the adventure, all waiting for him in the bustling port city of Hormuz. The insistent chirping of sparrows, usually my wake-up call, was lost beneath the urgent clopping of hooves and the shouts of grooms. Breeding season. It threw the entire rhythm of the royal stables into a whirlwind of activity, and my mornings were no longer my own. Instead of the usual leisurely grooming and exercising of the royal mares, I was now thrust into the heart of the Nicean breeding program, a meticulously orchestrated affair overseen by the head groom, a stern but surprisingly knowledgeable man named Mardonius. "Boy!" he'd barked just yesterday, his voice raspy from years of shouting over the din of the stables. "You think you know horses? You know nothing. During breeding season, you learn what a horse truly is." And learn I did. Mardonius's morning lectures became a fixture, each one a deep dive into equine anatomy and lineage. He'd hold up a hoof, explaining the significance of its shape and size, the subtle variations that distinguished a Nicean from a lesser breed. He'd trace the lines of a mare's flank, pointing out the desirable musculature that spoke of speed and endurance. He'd even delve into the intricacies of equine reproductive systems, leaving no details spared, much to the discomfort of some of the younger grooms. "The great king demands strong foals," he'd declare, his eyes scanning the assembled grooms. "Foals that will carry his warriors into battle. Foals that will represent the glory of Persia. And that," he'd add, tapping a finger against a clay tablet etched with intricate symbols, "is achieved through careful selection, through understanding the blood of these magnificent creatures." Those clay tablets were the heart of the Nicean breeding program. Each one represented a horse, its lineage meticulously recorded, stretching back generations. Birth dates, coat colors, notable characteristics, even temperaments. Everything was documented. Mardonius could recite the pedigree of any horse in the royal stud off the top of his head, a feat that both impressed and intimidated me. "This mare," he'd say, gesturing toward the sleek chestnut, "descends from the legendary stallion Arsames. Note the powerful legs, the deep chest. Her sire was renowned for his speed, her dam for her stamina, a perfect combination for the king's cavalry." The Persians' obsession with bloodlines bordered on religious fervor. They understood, perhaps better than anyone before them, the power of selective breeding. The Nicean wasn't just a horse, it was a symbol of Persian might, a living testament to their mastery over the natural world. These weren't simply animals. They were meticulously crafted instruments of war and symbols of royal prestige. Their bloodlines were guarded more closely than the royal treasury, ensuring the strength and purity of the royal stud remained unmatched. But how exactly did they achieve this level of precision in their breeding program? That's where the historical debate comes in. We have the records, the meticulous lineage charts, but the precise methods they employed remain a source of fascination and contention among historians. Some scholars argue that the Persians used a system of controlled mating, carefully pairing stallions and mares based on their recorded traits. They envision a highly structured process, overseen by expert breeders who analyzed the lineage tablets and made informed decisions about which horses to breed. Imagine Mardonius poring over his clay tablets, consulting with other grooms, meticulously planning the pairings for the next season. A sort of ancient equine matchmaking service, if you will. Others, however, propose a more organic approach. They argue that the Persians, while certainly aware of the importance of bloodlines, allowed the horses a greater degree of freedom in their mating choices. They suggest that the stallions, within a controlled environment, were allowed to select their mates, perhaps based on natural attraction or dominance displays. This theory suggests a more nuanced understanding of equine behavior on the part of the Persians, a recognition that the horses themselves might have some inherent wisdom when it came to choosing suitable partners. The most outlandish theory, and the one whispered amongst the younger, more irreverent grooms, proposes a system not unlike, well, let's just say a horse version of a modern dating app. They imagine a system where the characteristics of each horse were presented, perhaps on those very clay tablets, and then, based on these profiles, matches were made. Horse Tinder, they call it, giggling amongst themselves when Mardonius isn't around. While this theory is highly improbable, it does highlight the enduring mystery surrounding the Persian breeding program. The truth, as is often the case, likely lies somewhere in between these extremes. The Persians were undoubtedly methodical in their approach, using their detailed records to guide their decisions. But they were also likely pragmatic, recognizing the limitations of their knowledge and allowing for some degree of natural selection within their carefully controlled environment. Regardless of the exact methods they employed, one thing is certain. The Persians were masters of equine breeding. Their Nicaean horses were the envy of the ancient world, prized for their beauty, strength, and unwavering loyalty. And as I continued my apprenticeship in the royal stables, surrounded by these magnificent creatures and the legacy of their meticulously preserved bloodlines, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and respect for the ancient Persians and their deep understanding of the horse. The morning air hung crisp and sweet, tinged with the scent of dew-kissed grass and the faint, earthy aroma of the stables. Sunlight, still holding the pale gold of dawn, spilled across the paddocks, painting long shadows that stretched and shifted as the horses moved. I'd risen early, driven by a restless energy I couldn't quite explain. It was as if the very air hummed with anticipation, a secret whispered on the wind. And then I saw her. A bay mare, usually so vibrant and full of life, stood quietly in a corner of the paddock, her breath coming in soft puffs. She dipped her head, nudging something small and dark nestled in the straw. At first, it was just a tangle of limbs, wet and glistening. Then, slowly, it began to unfold, like a delicate origami creation coming to life. A foal. A wobbly-legged newborn foal, barely able to stand, its coat still damp from the birth. It struggled to find its footing, its long, thin legs splaying out in every direction, a comical dance of awkward grace. Even then, though, even covered in birth fluids and straw, you could see the hallmarks of Nicaean grace in the delicate curve of its neck, the elegant slope of its shoulders. It was a miniature masterpiece, a promise of future power and speed. The mare, her sides still heaving slightly, lowered her head and began to nuzzle her newborn protectively, her breath warm against its damp fur. She nudged it gently, encouraging it to stand. The foal, driven by instinct, struggled to its feet, its legs trembling with the effort. It took a tentative step, then another, stumbling slightly before finding its balance. It was a small victory, a testament to the resilience of life. And watching it, I felt a pang of something. Hope, perhaps. A reminder that even amidst the machinations of court, the endless pursuit of royal ambitions, life, in all its messy, beautiful glory, found a way. The birth of a healthy foal was always a cause for celebration. It was seen as a good omen, a sign of prosperity not only for the royal ranch but for the empire as a whole. Superstition ran deep in Nicaea, and omens were taken very seriously. A strong, healthy foal was a symbol of continued strength for the royal line, a promise of future generations of powerful war horses. Of course, you could find people who'd read all sorts of portents into anything: the way a raven flew, the direction of the wind, the color of the sky at sunset. Good luck finding a four-leaf clover in a pile of hay, though. Still, the birth of a foal was undeniably a positive event, a tangible sign of life and renewal in a world that often felt steeped in shadows and secrets. As the foal gained its footing, taking its first unsteady steps in the world, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This small, fragile creature represented something bigger than itself. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the midst of political intrigue and royal ambition, the cycle of life continued, unwavering and eternal. The mare, her maternal instincts fully engaged, continued to nuzzle and groom her newborn, her large, dark eyes watchful and protective. She was a formidable creature, known for her speed and agility on the training grounds, but in this moment she was simply a mother, fiercely devoted to her offspring. And then, the reality of the situation intruded on the idyllic scene. Within hours, the royal grooms would arrive, their starched uniforms in officious manner, a stark contrast to the natural beauty unfolding before me. They would assess the foal, checking its legs and teeth, making their pronouncements on its potential. And then they would perform a ritual that always struck me as both necessary and strangely barbaric. Foals born on the royal ranch were branded shortly after birth. The royal insignia, a stylized griffon, was seared into their flanks, a permanent mark of ownership, a declaration that they belonged to the king. It was animal bureaucracy at its finest, a cold, efficient system that categorized and cataloged these magnificent creatures from the moment they entered the world. It was a necessary evil, perhaps, a way to ensure the purity of the Nicean bloodlines, to prevent theft and maintain the king's control over his prized warhorses. But watching the process, seeing the iron heated to a glowing red, hearing the faint sizzle as it touched the foal's delicate skin, always made me feel a twinge of discomfort. This tiny creature, barely hours old, already bore the mark of its destiny. It was destined for greatness, for the battlefield, for a life of service to the crown. Its every move would be scrutinized, its every step measured against the standards of the royal stables. It would be trained and honed into a weapon of war, a symbol of Nicean power. And yet, in this moment, it was simply a foal, vulnerable and dependent, seeking comfort in the warmth of its mother's body. The contrast was stark, and it left me with a sense of unease. The beauty of the birth, the raw power of life unfolding before my eyes, juxtaposed with the cold, hard reality of the foal's future, the inevitability of its fate. It was a reminder that even in the most idyllic settings, the shadow of the crown loomed large, its influence extending to every corner of the kingdom, even to the smallest, most innocent of creatures. The sun continued its ascent, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. The air warmed and the sounds of the ranch began to stir, the clinking of bridles, the muffled thud of hooves against the stable floor. The world outside the paddock was waking up, oblivious to the small miracle that had taken place in the quiet corner of the stables. And as I watched the mare and her foal, bathed in the golden light of dawn, I knew that I had witnessed something special, something sacred. The birth of a legend, perhaps. A legend that would be shaped by the will of the king, by the demands of the empire, but a legend nonetheless. The whispers started in the stables, slithering between the grooms as they curried the horses. A new capital. Pesargadi. The king had chosen. The name, strange and unfamiliar, rolled off tongues with hesitant uncertainty. It tasted of dust and distant horizons. Old man Bardia, his knuckles gnarled and swollen from years of gripping reins, shook his head, spitting a stream of tobacco juice onto the packed earth. Another upheaval, he grumbled, his voice raspy as dry leaves. Just when a man gets settled, they pull up stakes and move the whole blasted kingdom. Younger grooms, eager and wide-eyed, saw things differently. For them, Pasargadae wasn't a disruption, it was a testament. Proof of King Cyrus's ever-expanding reach, a physical manifestation of Persia's ascent. Imagine it, one whispered, his eyes gleaming with a feverish excitement. A city built by the king himself, greater than anything the world has ever seen. The arguments simmered, fueled by speculation and rumor, spreading from the stables to the kitchens, from the training grounds to the very heart of the temporary camp. Cyrus's vision for Pasargadae wasn't simply a new seat of power. It wasn't just bricks and mortar, palaces and fortifications. It was a statement. He dreamt of a city that would encapsulate the spirit of Persia, a beacon of strength and prosperity that would draw ambassadors and traders from the farthest corners of the known world. He envisioned vast gardens, teeming with exotic flora, irrigated by intricate canal systems. He planned grand avenues lined with towering statues, depicting the heroes and legends of his people. He wanted Pasargadae to be a showcase, a testament to the might and the glory of the burgeoning Persian Empire. He spoke of palaces adorned with gold and lapis lazuli, of marketplaces overflowing with silks and spices, of a city that would inspire awe and admiration in all who beheld it. He spoke of a city that would last for millennia, a symbol of Persian dominance etched into the very landscape. He pored over maps, consulted with architects and engineers, his mind buzzing with ideas. He wanted Pasargadae to be more than just a capital. He wanted it to be a legend. And yet, for all his grand ambitions, for all his talk of gold and glory, Cyrus himself remained a man of surprisingly simple tastes. He could have draped himself in the finest silks, adorned himself with jewels the size of pigeon eggs. He could have feasted on roasted peacock and drunk wine from golden goblets. He was, after all, the king of kings, but he didn't. He preferred plain, functional clothing, often choosing to wear the same rough-spun tunic as his soldiers. He ate simple meals, often sharing his rations with his men. He slept on a modest cot, eschewing the lavishly appointed tents offered to him. Some whispered that it was a calculated move, a way of connecting with his troops, of fostering a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose. Others suggested it was a reflection of his upbringing, a reminder of his humble origins. And still others, perhaps more cynically, joked that the king was simply trying to save on laundry. After all, who had time to wash and iron elaborate robes when there was an empire to build? This incongruity, this stark contrast between the grandeur of his vision and the simplicity of his personal habits, only added to the mystique surrounding Cyrus. He was a king who dreamt of golden palaces but chose to wear a soldier's tunic. He was a conqueror who spoke of wealth and power but shared his meals with his men. He was a puzzle, a paradox, a man of simple tastes with a vision that stretched to the very horizon. And as the plans for Pasargadae took shape, as the foundations were laid and the walls began to rise, the people of Persia knew with a growing sense of certainty that they were witnessing the birth of something truly extraordinary. They were witnessing the creation of a legend, not just in stone and mortar, but in the very fabric of their king. A king who, despite his growing power, somehow managed to remain one of them. A king who dreamt of a city of gold, but never forgot the value of a simple tunic. A king who, perhaps, was just trying to save on laundry. Word reached the ranch like a whisper on the wind, carried on the breath of travelers returning from the south. Pasargadae, the name, still unfamiliar to many, held a strange weight, a promise of something grand. Construction had begun. They were quarrying stone, they said, massive blocks, some hauled from miles away across the plains, each one a testament to the ambition of the man who ordered them moved. These weren't just stones. They were the bones of a new city, the foundations of palaces and temples meant to touch the heavens. I could almost picture it. The dust rising in plumes above the construction site, the rhythmic clang of hammers against chisels, the creak of ropes straining against the weight of enormous stones inching their way across the land. The sheer human effort required to build a city from scratch, to carve a capital out of raw earth and stone, was staggering. Thousands of hands, a symphony of sweat and toil, all orchestrated by the will of one man, Cyrus. He wasn't simply building a city, though. He was building a symbol, a declaration etched in stone. Pasargadae was a message to the world, a proclamation that Persia had arrived. No longer a collection of warring tribes, but a unified empire, a force to be reckoned with. It was a statement of power, yes, but also of something more profound, a testament to the vision of a king who dared to dream of a world united under a single banner, governed by justice and tolerance. The stories filtering back spoke of a city unlike any other. Not a cramped, chaotic sprawl like some ancient capitals, but a planned city, laid out with deliberate care. Wide avenues, sprawling gardens, palaces adorned with intricate carvings, all designed to inspire awe and respect. They said Cyrus himself walked among the construction sites, his keen eyes missing nothing, directing the work with an almost obsessive attention to detail. He was building not just a city, but a legacy. And it wasn't just Persian hands shaping this new capital. The whispers spoke of architects and engineers brought in from all corners of the empire. Babylonians renowned for their mastery of brickwork, Medes skilled in crafting intricate stone carvings, even Egyptians, their knowledge of monumental architecture unmatched in the known world. Imagine ancient Persia, a melting pot of architectural brilliance, the world's first design fair, where the greatest minds of the age converged to contribute their skills to this grand endeavor. Cyrus, in his wisdom, understood that true strength wasn't solely about military might. It was about incorporating the best of what the world had to offer, blending diverse traditions into something new and magnificent. He reportedly consulted with these master builders, poring over blueprints and plans, debating the merits of different designs, incorporating elements from various cultures into a unique Persian style. A ziggurat here, inspired by the towering temples of Babylon, a columned hall there, reminiscent of the grand palaces of the Medes, perhaps even a hint of Egyptian influence in the colossal scale of the stonework. It was a deliberate fusion, a symbolic representation of the diverse peoples brought together under the Persian banner. This exchange of ideas wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about forging a shared identity, a sense of belonging. By incorporating elements from conquered territories, Cyrus wasn't simply displaying his power. He was acknowledging the value of those cultures, weaving them into the fabric of the new empire. He was saying, you are not just subjects, you are contributors. Your skills, your traditions are valued here. It was a shrewd political move, a way of fostering loyalty and preventing rebellion. But it was also, perhaps, a genuine expression of his belief in unity and respect. This city, rising from the dust of the Persian plains, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a testament to the audacity of Cyrus's vision, his ability to not just conquer, but to unite. It was a symbol of a new era, an age of unprecedented peace and prosperity under Persian rule. And as the whispers reached our remote ranch, even we, far removed from the grand construction, felt a sense of awe and anticipation. Pasargadae, a name that would soon be synonymous with power, with innovation, with the birth of a new world order. The stones of Pasargadae weren't just building a city, they were building a legend. The clatter of hooves and the creak of wagon wheels were the new soundtrack of my life. Pasargadae, the burgeoning capital, rose from the plains like a dream forged in stone and ambition. Yet, beneath the grandeur, a current of unease rippled through the ranks of the grooms, myself included. The air, thick with the scent of dust and sweat, carried whispers of discontent. Relocation hadn't been easy. Many of us had been uprooted from our ancestral lands, torn from the familiar embrace of family and tradition. Some saw it as a necessary sacrifice, a price willingly paid for the glory of the burgeoning empire. Others, their voices laced with bitterness, cursed the decree that had brought them here. I found myself caught in the middle, torn between loyalties. I understood the vision, the strategic brilliance of a centralized capital. Pasargadae, situated at the heart of the empire, was a symbol of unity, a testament to Cyrus's ambition. Its strategic location provided easy access to all corners of the vast kingdom, facilitating trade and communication. The sprawling palaces, the meticulously planned gardens, the bustling marketplaces, they were all part of a grand design, a blueprint for a glorious future. But I also understood the pain of displacement. I missed the rolling hills of my homeland, the familiar faces of my kin, the comforting rhythms of a life I'd known since birth. The nights were the hardest. Under the vast, star-strewn sky of Pasargadae, I'd often find myself staring into the flickering flames of the campfire, my thoughts drifting back to the home I'd left behind. The transition was fraught with challenges. The construction of the city was ongoing, a constant churn of activity that created both opportunities and anxieties. Newcomers arrived daily, each with their own stories, their own grievances. Resources were stretched thin. Tensions flared over access to water, grazing land for the horses, even the best spots to pitch our tents. The whispers grew louder, morphing from murmurs of discontent to open expressions of anger. One evening, huddled around a meager fire, I overheard a heated exchange between two grooms. "He calls it a grand vision," one spat, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "But all I see is a stolen homeland." The other, a wiry man with sun-weathered skin, countered, "We are building something great here, something that will last for generations." "At what cost?" the first retorted. "At the cost of our roots, our families, our very way of life?" I listened in silence, my heart heavy with the weight of their words. I understood both perspectives. The promise of Pasargadae was undeniable, yet the pain of displacement was a raw, open wound. Later that night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with questions. Was Cyrus a benevolent ruler, guiding his people towards a brighter future? Or was he a tyrant, sacrificing individual happiness for the sake of his grand ambitions? The debate raged not only within the ranks of the grooms, but also, I later learned, amongst the scholars and historians who would chronicle these times. Even now, centuries later, the exact nature of Cyrus's relocation policies remains a subject of scholarly discussion. Some argue that it was a forced migration, a brutal uprooting of entire communities. They point to the accounts of resentment and unrest, the whispers of revolt that simmered beneath the surface of Pasargade's glittering facade. Others maintain that it was a more nuanced process, a combination of strategic resettlement and incentivized migration. They cite the opportunities for advancement, the access to resources and infrastructure that the new capital offered. They speak of compelling moving packages, offering land, resources, and even positions within the burgeoning administration. The truth, I suspect, lies somewhere in the middle. While some were undoubtedly coerced, others may have seen the move as a chance for a better life. The allure of a new beginning, the promise of prosperity, may have been enough to persuade some to leave their ancestral homes behind. Perhaps, for them, the whispers of revolt were drowned out by the siren call of opportunity. My own position remained precarious. I was a servant of the empire, bound by duty and loyalty to Cyrus. Yet I couldn't completely silence the whispers of dissent that echoed in my own heart. The longing for home, the ache of separation, were feelings I couldn't ignore. I tried to focus on the positive aspects of Pasargadae. The bustling markets offered a dizzying array of goods from all corners of the empire. The majestic palaces, though still under construction, hinted at the grandeur to come. The gardens, irrigated by a sophisticated network of canals, were a testament to human ingenuity. But even amidst this burgeoning splendor, the whispers persisted, a constant reminder of the sacrifices that had been made, the lives that had been disrupted. I continued my work, tending to the royal horses, my hands busy, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. The future of the empire, and my own place within it, remained uncertain. The whispers of revolt, once a faint murmur, were growing louder, a storm gathering on the horizon. The orders arrived with the dawn, crisp and sharp as the morning air. Several of the ranch's finest horses were to be transported to Pasargadae for the king's personal use, and I, it seemed, was chosen to accompany them. A knot formed in my stomach, a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Anticipation for the journey, for the glimpse of the new capital city, a place whispered about in hushed tones of awe and wonder. Dread for the unknown, for the miles that stretched between here and there, a vast and unforgiving landscape I'd only heard tales of. I ran a hand down the smooth, warm flank of my favorite mare, Zephyr, breathing in the familiar, comforting scent of horse and hay, a smell I knew I would miss. Already the ranch felt miles away, the familiar routines and faces fading into the background like a half-remembered dream. Yet, beneath the apprehension, a twinge of excitement pulsed. Pasargadae. The name itself sounded like a whispered secret, a promise of something grand. The journey began much as it continued, long stretches of dusty road under a relentless sun. The horses, thankfully, were used to travel, their hooves beating out a steady rhythm against the parched earth. Not so the camels. These grumpy beasts, laden with supplies, seemed perpetually disgruntled, spitting and groaning their displeasure with every lurching step. Their drivers, weathered and stoic, paid them little mind, their eyes fixed on the distant horizon. We traveled in a small caravan, a motley collection of grooms, soldiers, and myself, feeling utterly insignificant in the vastness of the Persian landscape. The days melted into one another, marked only by the rising and setting of the sun and the dwindling supply of fresh water. We ate dust-coated dates and stale bread, slept under a blanket of stars brighter than any I'd ever seen back at the ranch, and dreamt of cool streams and shade. The bandits came on the third day. They materialized from the shimmering heat haze like desert spirits, their faces wrapped in scarves, eyes glinting with greed. They were, as it turned out, really into horses, especially royal horses, freshly groomed and destined for the king's stables. Our small band of soldiers formed a protective circle around the animals, swords drawn. The air crackled with tension, the silence broken only by the nervous snorting of the horses and the low growl emanating from the camels, who, for once, seemed to share our sense of impending doom. A brief, chaotic skirmish ensued. Swords clashed against crude blades, dust and sand swirling in the melee. I huddled behind a particularly ill-tempered camel, offering a silent prayer to any god who might be listening. In the end, we were fortunate. The bandits, though numerous, were poorly organized. The disciplined soldiers, combined with the sheer stubbornness of the camels who refused to budge, proved too much for them. They scattered as quickly as they had appeared, disappearing back into the heat haze, leaving behind a handful of discarded weapons and the lingering taste of fear in the dry desert air. As we continued our journey, I learned from one of the older soldiers about the Persian system of relay stations along the Royal Road. He explained how messengers, carrying important scrolls or riding fresh horses, could cover vast distances in a matter of days. Fresh horses were kept at these stations, ready to be saddled and ridden at a moment's notice. The messengers would ride at breakneck speed to the next station, hand off their dispatch or exhausted mount, and a new rider would take over, continuing the relay. It was, he explained with a twinkle in his eye, a sort of ancient FedEx, but for horses and really important scrolls. The king, it seemed, could communicate with the farthest reaches of his empire with astonishing speed. This intricate network of roads and riders, spanning hundreds of miles, was a testament to the Persian ingenuity and their commitment to efficient communication. It also, I realized, underscored the importance of our mission. These horses, destined for the king himself, were clearly highly valued. The landscape began to change as we drew closer to Pasargadae. The flat, monotonous desert gave way to rolling hills, patches of green appearing like welcome oases. The air felt cooler, cleaner, carrying the scent of water and something else, something unfamiliar yet intriguing. We passed small villages, clusters of mud brick houses, huddled together against the elements, children running alongside our caravan, their faces alight with curiosity. We were nearing civilization, and with it, the end of our journey. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, we crested a rise, and there, in the distance, nestled in a fertile valley, lay Pasargadae. It wasn't the sprawling metropolis I'd imagined, but rather a collection of magnificent palaces and gardens, shimmering under the late afternoon sun. Even from afar, I could sense the power and grandeur emanating from the city. The walls, built of massive stone blocks, seemed to rise organically from the earth, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. The famous gardens, a vibrant tapestry of green and gold, promised a welcome respite from the harsh desert landscape. This was the heart of the Persian Empire, the seat of power, and I, a humble groom from a distant ranch, had brought a piece of it home. The dread that had plagued me for so long began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of awe and a quiet pride. I had faced the dangers of the road, survived encounters with grumpy camels and horse-loving bandits, and delivered the king's steeds safely to their destination, Pasargadae. The whispered secret had been revealed, and it was more magnificent than I could have ever imagined. The wind whipped across the plain, carrying the scent of cedar and the gritty taste of dust. Before me, sprawling across the valley floor, lay Pasargadae, not the serene ruin I had imagined, but a vibrant, bustling construction site. Half-finished palaces rose from the earth like skeletal giants, their stone limbs reaching towards the vast, cloud-strewn sky. Scaffolding, a latticework of timber, clung to the emerging walls, a precarious network teeming with workers. Everywhere I looked, men swarmed like ants, their movements a blur of organized chaos. Some hauled massive blocks of stone on rollers, their muscles straining under the immense weight. Others chipped away at giant slabs, shaping them with precise blows of their hammers. The air vibrated with the constant clang of metal on stone, the rhythmic thud of mallets, the shouts of overseers directing the flow of materials and manpower. The sheer scale of the project was breathtaking. Columns, taller than any I had ever seen, lay prostrate on the ground, waiting to be hoisted into place. Intricate carvings, still rough and unfinished, hinted at the opulence to come. Stone masons meticulously carved floral patterns and mythical creatures into the palace walls, their faces etched with concentration. Even in its unfinished state, Pasargadae radiated a sense of power, a testament to the ambition of Cyrus and the skill of his builders. But it was also a scene of utter chaos. Dust devils danced across the plain, swirling up clouds of fine particles that coated everything in a thin layer of grit. The ground was a treacherous maze of trenches, piles of rubble, and discarded tools. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of hammering, sawing, shouting, and the rumble of heavy stones being dragged across the earth. I watched as two workers, their faces streaked with sweat and dust, struggled to maneuver a massive stone lintel into position. They grunted and strained, their voices lost in the din. Suddenly, the lintel slipped, and a collective gasp rippled through the nearby workers. With a last, desperate heave, they managed to regain control, but the near disaster highlighted the precarious nature of their work. Further along, a group of architects huddled around a large, rolled-out parchment, their brows furrowed in concentration. They gestured animatedly, pointing at various sections of the plan and arguing amongst themselves. Their voices, sharp and insistent, rose above the surrounding clamor. "The king specifically requested cedar for this section," one architect insisted, his voice tight with frustration. "Not cypress!" "Cedar is too expensive," another retorted, waving his hands dismissively. "Cypress is just as strong and readily available. The king won't even notice the difference." "He will notice. He will. And when he does, heads will roll." The argument continued, escalating in volume and intensity, a small drama unfolding amidst the larger spectacle of construction. I moved closer, drawn by the fascinating glimpse into the challenges of building on such a monumental scale. The parchment, I realized, was a blueprint for one of the palaces, a complex network of lines and symbols that represented the grand vision of Cyrus. It was a remarkable document, a testament to the ingenuity and planning that underpinned the project. Yet, even with such meticulous planning, disputes and disagreements seemed inevitable. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the air grew thick with the smell of sweat and dust. Workers paused in their labors, seeking shade beneath the unfinished walls or gulping water from clay jugs. Even in their exhaustion, there was a palpable sense of excitement, a shared understanding that they were participating in something truly extraordinary. I continued to wander through the bustling site, marveling at the sheer scale of the undertaking. Everywhere I looked, there was evidence of meticulous planning and painstaking execution. Stonecutters shaped blocks with incredible precision. Carpenters crafted intricate joints, and laborers hauled materials with seemingly boundless energy. The entire site was a testament to the power of human ingenuity and the unwavering determination of Cyrus to create a capital worthy of his vast empire. Yet, amidst all the grandeur and ambition, there were also moments of quiet beauty. I watched as a lone craftsman carefully carved the delicate features of a winged bull, his touch gentle and precise. The sun cast long shadows across the plain, painting the scene in hues of gold and ochre. For a brief moment, the chaos faded, replaced by a sense of tranquility and wonder. As the day drew to a close, the activity began to slow. Workers gathered their tools and trudged towards the temporary encampments that had sprung up around the construction site. The sound of hammering gradually subsided, replaced by the murmur of voices and the crackling of campfires. The dust settled, revealing the skeletal outlines of the palaces against the darkening sky. Pasargadae, in its unfinished state, was a city of contrasts, a chaotic blend of grandeur and dust, ambition and struggle, meticulous planning and inevitable setbacks. It was a living, breathing organism, constantly evolving and changing. And as I stood there, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the horizon, I knew that I was witnessing the birth of a legend. The dust swirled around my sandals, a fine ochre powder clinging to the damp patches on my tunic where sweat had gathered. The midday sun beat down mercilessly, even here on the verge of the Paradisia, Cyrus's magnificent gardens. The air, however, carried a sweet fragrance, a heady mix of blossoming jasmine and the sharp tang of cedar. It was a stark contrast to the dry, dusty plain surrounding Pasargadae. My task was immense, overseeing the construction of the royal stables, fit for the finest steeds in the empire. These weren't mere shelters. Cyrus had decreed they should be palaces for his horses, echoing the grandeur of the Paradisia itself. I ran a calloused hand over the cool, smooth marble of a half-finished archway. The stonemasons, their faces streaked with sweat and dust, chipped and hammered, coaxing intricate floral patterns from the raw stone. Even the supporting columns were being carved with depictions of rearing stallions and winged griffins, mythical creatures signifying strength and power. Inside, the stalls were taking shape, spacious and airy, each one fitted with its own trough for fresh water. The floors, I knew, would be laid with intricate mosaics, depicting scenes of the royal hunt. No detail was too small, no expense spared. Cyrus demanded perfection, a reflection of his own ambitions and the glory of his burgeoning empire. The Paradisia was more than just a garden. It was a statement. Cyrus called it his enclosed park, but it was, in reality, a meticulously crafted microcosm of the world he sought to rule. Its walls, although meant to keep out unwanted visitors and predators, also served to delineate a space of perfect order and control, a paradise distinct from the untamed wilderness beyond. Within those walls, Cyrus cultivated not only rare and fragrant flora, but also the very image of his power. He'd instructed me, in meticulous detail, about the layout, the specific plants he desired, the positioning of the water features. Everything had meaning. Everything symbolized something about his vision for Persia. The cypress trees, reaching towards the heavens, represented immortality. The meticulously planned irrigation channels, bringing life-giving water to every corner of the garden, symbolized his just and benevolent rule. I paused in the shade of a half-built wall, gazing towards the Paradisia. The scale of it was breathtaking. From my vantage point, I could see the glint of water from the artificial lakes and the vibrant hues of the flowers already in bloom. Laborers moved like ants amongst the greenery, planting, pruning, and shaping the landscape according to Cyrus's meticulous plan. I'd overheard him speaking to his advisors, explaining how the Paradisia reflected the divine order of the cosmos, how the precise placement of each element mirrored the constellations in the night sky. It was a tangible representation of his belief in his divine mandate to rule, a message written in earth and water, in the fragrance of blossoms and the rustling leaves of exotic trees. He'd sent envoys across his vast empire, collecting specimens from the furthest reaches of his conquered territories. I'd seen crates arrive, filled with saplings of unfamiliar trees, their leaves, a kaleidoscope of colors I'd never witnessed before. Seeds of strange and fragrant flowers were carefully nurtured in specially prepared beds. And the animals. From India came brightly plumed peacocks, strutting through the growing groves. From the mountains of Media he'd brought ibex, their curved horns glinting in the sun. Even from distant Egypt, he'd acquired monkeys, their chattering calls echoing through the gardens. It was a living testament to the breadth of his power, a tangible display of the wealth and diversity of the lands now united under his banner. The Paradisia and the magnificent stables I was building beside it were intended to impress. They were meant to awe visiting dignitaries, to remind them of the vastness of Cyrus's empire and the might of his armies. But I suspected there was more to it than mere display. I believed Cyrus found solace within those walls, a sense of peace amidst the chaos of conquest. He often walked through the gardens, even in the blistering heat, observing the progress, inspecting the plants, and interacting with the animals. It was in those moments, I felt, that he truly connected with his vision, with the idea of a world united under his just and benevolent rule. The horses that would reside in the stables would be more than just beasts of burden. They were symbols of Persian military strength, swift and powerful, instrumental in Cyrus's victories. They deserved palaces, just as the gardens represented a paradise on earth. The two structures, side by side, served to reinforce the image of Cyrus, not just as a conqueror, but as a builder, a cultivator, a king who brought order and prosperity to the lands he ruled. The work was arduous, the days long and demanding. But as I looked upon the growing grandeur of the stables, the meticulous craftsmanship of the stonemasons, and the vibrant life blossoming within the Paradisia, I felt a sense of pride in being a part of something truly magnificent. It was more than just brick and mortar, more than just earth and water. It was the embodiment of a vision, a testament to the ambition and power of Cyrus the Great, a vision that, for a brief moment, seemed to transform the harsh landscape of Pasargadae into a true garden of paradise. The chamber shimmered, a kaleidoscope of glazed brick depicting lions, bulls, and fantastical creatures. Sunlight, filtered through intricately woven tapestries, cast long, dancing shadows across the polished stone floor. I stood, heart pounding a steady rhythm against my ribs, the reins of the Nicean stallion draped across my forearm. The horse, a magnificent creature with a coat the color of burnished copper, shifted beneath me, its muscles rippling with barely contained power. I murmured soothingly, stroking his neck, feeling the warmth of his breath on my hand. Cyrus, king of Persia, stood a few paces away, his attention focused on a group of men, their faces etched with the dust of labor. They gestured animatedly, pointing towards intricate blueprints spread across a low table. The stallion snorted, sensing my nervousness, and I tightened my grip on the reins, focusing on the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest. Cyrus, oblivious to the horse's restlessness, spoke in a low, measured tone, his voice carrying an unexpected gentleness. He questioned the builders about the progress on the palace, the intricacies of the irrigation system designed to feed the sprawling gardens, and the placement of the colossal stone statues that would guard the entrance. Up close, the king was surprisingly unassuming. He was not a physically imposing man, yet there was an undeniable aura of authority that emanated from him. His robes, though finely woven, lacked the ostentatious embellishments I had expected. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, a flicker of something almost fierce, burning behind his dark eyes, the look of a man driven by a vision. A vision, I realized, of a unified Persia, a vast empire stretching from the shores of the Mediterranean to the distant steppes of Central Asia. The builders, emboldened by the king's attentive listening, offered suggestions, debated construction techniques, and outlined the challenges they faced. Cyrus listened patiently, nodding occasionally, interjecting with insightful questions that demonstrated a keen understanding of the project. He wasn't merely a figurehead, delegating responsibility. He was actively involved, shaping the very foundations of his empire, brick by painstaking brick. The stallion, sensing my growing calm, settled, his head dipping slightly as he nudged my hand. I offered him a piece of dried fruit, which he accepted with a soft nicker. The exchange, a small moment of connection amidst the grandeur of the Persian court, grounded me. It was a reminder that even amidst the swirl of power and ambition, there was still room for simple acts of kindness, for the quiet understanding between human and beast. As I watched Cyrus interact with the builders, I couldn't help but ponder the historical debate that surrounded his reign. Was he driven by personal ambition, a thirst for power that led him to conquer and subjugate neighboring kingdoms? Or was there a genuine desire to improve the lives of those he ruled, to create a more just and prosperous world? The answer, I suspected, was far more complex than a simple binary. His famous Cyrus cylinder, a clay artifact inscribed with his declarations upon conquering Babylon, spoke of tolerance, of allowing exiled peoples to return to their homelands, of respecting their religious beliefs. These were not the actions of a typical conqueror, driven solely by greed and lust for domination. Yet, the very act of conquest, of imposing one's will upon another, inevitably brought suffering and disruption. The Persian Empire, vast and powerful, was built upon the subjugation of countless peoples, their cultures and traditions subsumed into the larger imperial framework. The benefits of a unified legal system, of standardized weights and measures, of improved infrastructure, came at a cost. The question then became, did the ends justify the means? Cyrus' focus shifted from the palace construction to matters of state. He addressed his advisors, discussing trade routes with Lydia, diplomatic overtures to Egypt, and the ongoing consolidation of power in the newly conquered provinces. His voice remained calm, even as he discussed matters of war and strategy. There was a calculated precision in his words, a sense of unwavering purpose that left no room for doubt. He was a master strategist, a skilled diplomat, a leader capable of inspiring both loyalty and fear. The weight of the reins in my hand, the warmth of the stallion's breath on my skin, kept me tethered to the present moment, preventing me from getting lost in the swirling currents of courtly intrigue. I observed the subtle shifts in power dynamics, the veiled glances exchanged between advisors, the unspoken tensions that simmered beneath the surface of polite formality. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. The meeting drew to a close, the builders and advisors dispersing with a flurry of bows and murmured farewells. Cyrus turned towards me, his gaze finally meeting mine. For a moment, the intensity of his stare held me captive. He offered a brief nod of acknowledgement, a flicker of a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "The stallion behaves well," he observed, his voice soft yet resonant. "He is a magnificent animal, Your Majesty," I replied. bowing my head in respect. He extended a hand, gently stroking the stallion's flank. Indeed, he represents the strength and spirit of Persia. Much like our empire, he requires a firm hand, but also a gentle touch. With that, he turned and walked away, his figure receding into the shadows of the palace. I stood there for a moment, the reins still clutched in my hand, the weight of his words settling upon me. The palace of Cyrus, a testament to his ambition and vision, was more than just a structure of brick and stone. It was a symbol of a changing world, a world forged in the crucible of conquest and shaped by the will of a single man, a man whose legacy, like the empire he built, would continue to be debated for centuries to come. The air crackled with an energy I hadn't felt before, a palpable hum that vibrated through the very stones of Pasargadae. The city blazed with light, 1,000 flickering flames pushing back the encroaching darkness. Bonfires roared in the open squares, their flames leaping towards the star-dusted sky. Torches lined the rooftops, casting dancing shadows that played across the intricately carved facades of the palaces. Even the smallest of homes had a lamp burning in the window, a collective beacon against the night. It was Nowruz, the Persian New Year, and Pasargadae was alive. Music, a frenetic swirl of drums and flutes, poured from every corner. The rhythm was infectious, pulling me along with the surging crowds that filled the streets. Dancers, clad in vibrant silks and swirling with dizzying speed, weaved through the throngs of people. Their movements, fluid and graceful, mimicked the flames that danced around them. Garlands of flowers, woven with fragrant herbs, adorned their hair and wrists, filling the air with a heady perfume. Laughter echoed through the streets, mingling with the music and the crackling of the fires. Everywhere I looked, faces were illuminated by a joy so pure, so infectious, that I couldn't help but smile. This was more than just a celebration of a new year. It was a visceral expression of hope, a testament to the enduring power of light. I learned from a friendly local, his face flushed with excitement and pomegranate wine, that Nowruz was deeply rooted in the Zoroastrian faith, the dominant religion of the Persian Empire. For them, it was a commemoration of the cosmic battle between good and evil, light and darkness, a reaffirmation that good would ultimately prevail. The fires that burned throughout the city weren't merely decorative. They were symbolic representations of that divine light, purifying the old year and welcoming the new with a cleansed spirit. He explained, between sips of his wine and bites of a sweet pastry, how Nowruz was also a celebration of renewal, a time for fresh starts. The arrival of spring, with its burgeoning life and vibrant colors, mirrored the sense of hope and optimism that permeated the festival. The earth was awakening from its winter slumber, and so too were the spirits of the people. And speaking of renewal, I learned about a rather interesting tradition associated with Nowruz. Apparently, Persians believed that wearing new clothes during the festival brought good luck for the year ahead. Everyone, from the wealthiest nobleman to the humblest farmer, donned their finest new garments for the occasion. The streets were a riot of color, a dazzling display of silks, linens, and intricately embroidered robes. It was a spectacle to behold, and I had to admit, the collective effort towards sartorial elegance added a certain charm to the already vibrant atmosphere. This whole new clothes for the new year thing got me thinking. I'm pretty sure ancient Persia invented spring cleaning. Imagine the pressure. Not only do you have to prepare for a massive festival, but you also have to ensure your entire household is spotless and everyone has a brand new outfit to wear. It's the ultimate New Year's resolution, ancient Persian style. And it's not just about clothes. Homes were also thoroughly cleaned and decorated in preparation for Nowruz. They even had special symbolic foods, like the haft-seen table, which featured 7 items, starting with the letter S in Persian, each representing a different aspect of good fortune and prosperity. And you know what else I'm convinced they invented? New Year's resolutions involving pomegranates. Everywhere I looked, people were eating pomegranates, drinking pomegranate juice, and even using pomegranate seeds in their decorations. This vibrant fruit, with its abundance of seeds, was a symbol of fertility and abundance, a perfect embodiment of the hopes and aspirations for the new year. I overheard snippets of conversations about eating a certain number of pomegranate seeds for good luck, or making wishes while throwing the seeds into a fire. It was like the ancient Persian equivalent of resolving to eat healthier or join a gym, except way more delicious and aesthetically pleasing. As the night deepened, the energy in Pasargadae only intensified. The music grew louder, the dancing more frenetic, the flames higher. The air was thick with the scent of burning cedarwood, mingling with the sweet aroma of flowers and the savory smells of roasted meats and spiced pastries. I found myself swept along by the tide of revelers, caught up in the infectious joy of the moment. I danced, I laughed, I feasted on delicacies I couldn't even name, and I felt a sense of connection to this ancient culture, to this celebration of light and renewal that transcended language and time. Witnessing Nowruz in Pasargadae was an experience I would never forget. It was a powerful reminder of the enduring human need for hope, for celebration, for connection, and it left me with a lingering sense of wonder, a renewed appreciation for the simple joys of life, and a strong desire to incorporate more pomegranates into my own New Year's traditions. The rhythmic clang of hammer against stone, once a constant symphony echoing across the plains of Pasargadae, began to fade. The bustling activity, the shouts of overseers, the creak of cranes hoisting massive blocks of limestone, all softened like a dying ember. The great palace, Cyrus's legacy in stone, still lacked its final flourishes, yet the king seemed to have lost interest. He spent his days less amongst architects and builders, and more in the tranquil solitude of his gardens, often found wandering amidst the fragrant blossoms and whispering willows, his gaze fixed on a certain point in the distance. There, rising slowly against the backdrop of the rugged Zagros Mountains, stood a simple, unadorned stone structure, stark in its contrast to the grandeur envisioned for the palace. It was Cyrus's tomb, already under construction. The whispers began softly, like the rustling of leaves carried on the wind. They snaked through the ranks of the immortals, slithered through the courtiers and servants, finally reaching the ears of the common people. The king, they murmured, was preparing for his final journey. The tireless conqueror, the shepherd who united the disparate tribes of Persia into a mighty empire, the just ruler whose name resonated with respect and even affection, he was sensing the approach of death. Some claimed to have seen him standing by his tomb in the fading light of dusk, a solitary figure dwarfed by the immensity of the plains, his shoulders slightly stooped, as if burdened by the weight of years, or, perhaps, the weight of destiny. Cyrus's contemplation on mortality, however, was not merely a personal introspection. It was a profound reflection on the very nature of power and empire. He had seen kingdoms rise and fall, witnessed the relentless march of time erode the mightiest of fortresses, and understood that even the greatest of rulers were but fleeting shadows against the backdrop of eternity. His meditations near his future resting place were not just about his own demise, but about the transient nature of all things, the cyclical dance of life and death that governed the universe. He knew that his empire, like all those that had come before, would one day face its own twilight. The laws he had established, the justice he had striven to uphold, even the very memory of his name, were all subject to the relentless erosion of time. This awareness, far from filling him with despair, seemed to imbue him with a sense of quiet acceptance, a deep understanding of the cosmic order. The simplicity of his tomb was a deliberate choice, a rejection of the ostentatious displays of power so common amongst kings. It was a statement, a testament to his belief that true greatness lay not in the accumulation of material wealth, or the construction of towering monuments, but in the just and compassionate governance of his people. The unadorned stone structure, rising from the earth with stark elegance, was a reflection of his own philosophy, simple, enduring, and intimately connected to the land he loved. It spoke not of the fear of death, but of acceptance, a quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable cycle of existence. He understood that the true monuments to his reign were not built of brick and mortar, but etched in the hearts and minds of his people, in the laws that protected them, in the peace and prosperity that his rule had brought. The rumors swirling around his impending death only served to heighten the reverence in which he was held. The people of his vast empire, from the bustling markets of Babylon to the remote villages of Persia, prayed for his long life, recognizing that his reign represented an unprecedented era of stability and justice. The conquered nations, once resentful of their subjugation, had come to appreciate the fairness and tolerance of their Persian overlords. They had witnessed the brutality of other empires, the wanton destruction and enslavement that often followed conquest. Cyrus, however, had offered them a different path, a path of integration and respect, a path that allowed them to preserve their own cultures and customs, while benefiting from the security and prosperity of the Persian Empire. The irony was not lost on Cyrus. The closer he seemed to be to death, the more solidified his legacy became. The whispers of his mortality, intended to diminish him, had instead amplified his stature. He had become more than a king. He had become a symbol, an embodiment of wisdom, justice, and compassion. His legacy would not only live on in the hearts of his people, but would also resonate through the ages, influencing generations of rulers. Centuries later, Alexander the Great, the Macedonian conqueror who would sweep across Persia and establish an empire even vaster than Cyrus's own, would visit Pasargadae and stand before the simple tomb. Struck by the quiet dignity of the structure and the enduring respect that the name of Cyrus still commanded, Alexander reportedly ordered the tomb to be repaired and placed under guard, a testament to the profound impact of Cyrus's reign. This act of reverence from a conqueror who had overthrown the Achaemenid dynasty, the empire that Cyrus had founded, served as a powerful affirmation of the enduring legacy of the shepherd king. It was a testament to the fact that true greatness transcended the boundaries of time and empire, that the whispers of mortality could not diminish the echoes of a life lived with wisdom, justice, and compassion. The simple stone structure on the plains of Pasargadae, intended as a final resting place, became a symbol of immortality, a silent witness to the enduring power of a just and righteous king. The rider arrived, dust-caked and weary, his voice a dry rasp as he delivered the news that settled over Pasargadae like a shroud. Cyrus, the king, the builder, the shepherd of nations, was dead. Fallen in battle, they said, on the fringes of the vast empire he had forged. The words, so few, carried the weight of an avalanche, burying the city's vibrant energy beneath a thick layer of grief. The rhythmic clang of hammers striking stone, once the city's heartbeat, faded into an echoing silence. The bustling crowds of workers, artisans, and traders thinned, their movements slow and heavy with sorrow. The air, once thick with the scent of cedar and the tang of sweat, now carried the scent of incense and the hushed murmur of prayers. Pasargadae, no longer a construction site teeming with life, was becoming something else, something stiller, something sacred. A monument to a king's vision, now forever incomplete. I felt a pang of loss, sharp and unexpected, for a king I had never met, for a future that would never be. The change was palpable. The energy that had pulsed through every stone, every carefully planned avenue, now retreated inwards, leaving behind a shell of its former self. The focus shifted. No longer a bustling capital in the making, Pasargadae began its transformation into a memorial. The half-finished structures, once symbols of an empire's boundless ambition, now stood as silent witnesses to a life cut short. Cyrus's grand palace, meant to be a testament to his power and wisdom, felt strangely empty, its vast halls echoing with the absence of its intended occupant. The vibrant gardens, planned to burst with the colors and scents of Persia, seemed to wilt in sympathy. The once dynamic city was becoming a static reflection of a past glory, a poignant reminder of what might have been. Pasargadae, once the symbol of an ever-expanding empire, had become a memorial to its founder. Even now, centuries later, the whispers of uncertainty linger. The official story, etched in stone and repeated by court scribes, proclaimed a heroic death in battle. A fitting end, perhaps, for a warrior king, a leader who had spent his life on horseback, uniting disparate tribes under a single banner. He fell, they said, fighting bravely against a fierce nomadic tribe on the eastern frontier, defending the very borders of his realm. His body, recovered from the battlefield, was brought back to Pasargadae with all the pomp and ceremony befitting a great king. But the whispers persist, weaving a different narrative, one shrouded in mystery and conjecture. They speak of a king weary of war, yearning for the quiet tranquility of his beloved Pasargadae. They paint a picture of Cyrus, not on a bloody battlefield, but in his bedchamber, surrounded by the familiar comforts of home. He died peacefully, they say, dreaming not of conquest and glory, but of the wide-open plains of his youth, the wind in his hair, the rhythmic beat of hooves beneath him. He dreamt of horses strong and swift, their coats gleaming in the sun. He dreamt of the sweet taste of pomegranates, bursting with the flavor of his homeland. He dreamt of a life lived fully, a reign marked by justice and compassion. The truth, like so much of the past, remains elusive. The official records, carefully curated and preserved, tell one story, but the unofficial accounts, passed down through generations in hushed tones, suggest another. Historians continue to pore over the scant evidence, piecing together fragments of information, searching for clues that might shed light on the final moments of Cyrus the Great. Did he breathe his last amidst the chaos and carnage of battle, a warrior king to the very end? Or did he slip away quietly in his sleep, his spirit returning to the land he loved? The debate continues, fueling scholarly discussions and inspiring countless works of art and literature. Some historians argue that the official account is a carefully constructed narrative designed to bolster the image of the new ruler and maintain stability within the empire. A heroic death in battle, they contend, would inspire loyalty and discourage rebellion far more effectively than a quiet passing in old age. Others maintain that the official version is accurate, pointing to the fact that Cyrus, even in his later years, remained a formidable warrior, always eager to defend his realm. Still others suggest a compromise. Perhaps Cyrus was indeed injured in battle, but his wounds, while not immediately fatal, weakened him considerably. He may have been brought back to Pasargadae, where he succumbed to his injuries days or even weeks later. This theory, while lacking concrete evidence, offers a plausible explanation for the conflicting accounts. It reconciles the image of Cyrus as a warrior king, with the whispers of a peaceful death surrounded by loved ones. Whatever the truth may be, the legacy of Cyrus the Great endures. Whether he died on the battlefield or in his bed, his impact on the world remains undeniable. He founded an empire that stretched across vast swaths of Asia, bringing with it a period of relative peace and prosperity. He introduced a new model of kingship based on tolerance and respect for diverse cultures and religions. And he left behind a city, Pasargadae, that stands as a testament to his vision and ambition, a place where the whispers of the past continue to echo through the ages. The stones themselves seem to hold the secrets of his reign, the triumphs and the tragedies, the glory and the grief. And somewhere within those stones, perhaps, lies the answer to the enduring mystery of his death. The air in Pasargadae's marketplace buzzed with a symphony of bartering merchants, bleating goats, and the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer. The scent of saffron and cardamom hung heavy, mingling with the earthy aroma of dates and figs. I navigated the bustling crowd, my senses overwhelmed by the vibrant tapestry of sights, sounds, and smells. Then, through the throng, a familiar, weathered face caught my eye. It was the fisherman from Hormuz. He hadn't changed much. The same sun-baked skin, the same network of wrinkles etched around his kind eyes, the same easy smile that crinkled the corners of his mouth. But his stall was considerably more impressive than the humble cart he'd had back on the coast. Here, in the heart of the empire, he displayed a bounty of goods. Glistening fish packed in ice, mounds of exotic spices radiating intoxicating aromas, and intricate crafts that hinted at faraway lands. "Well met again, friend," I greeted him, a smile spreading across my own face. "And you," he boomed, his voice as warm and resonant as the ocean waves. "It seems the winds of fortune have brought us together once more. Come, tell me, what brings you to Pasargadae?" We fell into easy conversation, catching up on the months that had passed since our last encounter. He'd traveled extensively, his journey taking him far beyond the Persian borders. I recalled his mention of Egypt and asked him about his time there. "Ah, Egypt," he sighed, a wistful look in his eyes. "A land of wonders, that one. The Nile, a river like no other, teeming with life. The pyramids, monuments to a bygone era, reaching towards the heavens. And the people," he added, a smile returning to his face, "warm and welcoming. I made some good friends there, learned much about their customs and beliefs." He gestured towards a collection of small, intricately carved amulets displayed on his stall. "These, for instance, are blessings from a temple in Thebes. Protects against evil spirits, they say." His stall, I realized, was more than just a place of commerce. It was a microcosm of the world beyond the empire's borders, a testament to the intricate web of trade routes that crisscrossed the known world. He had spices from the east, silks from lands I'd only heard whispers of, and stories that painted vivid pictures of distant cultures. He spoke of bustling marketplaces in Babylon, the majestic cedars of Lebanon, the skilled craftsmen of Phoenicia. His words wove a tapestry of interconnectedness, demonstrating how the flow of goods and ideas transcended geographical boundaries. He offered me a handful of dried dates, sweet and chewy. "Try these," he urged, "from an oasis near the Red Sea, the best I've ever tasted." As I savored the dates, I considered the implications of his travels. Here, in the heart of the Persian Empire, I was encountering tangible evidence of the world's vastness, its diversity, and the intricate networks that connected disparate peoples. It struck me that the empire, despite its immense size and power, was but one piece of a much larger puzzle. He pointed to a beautifully crafted wooden box inlaid with ivory. "This came from Egypt," he explained. "See the carvings? They depict their gods and goddesses. Fascinating, aren't they?" I examined the intricate carvings, marveling at the artistry. It was unlike anything I had seen within the empire. "They are indeed," I agreed, thinking of the fisherman's words about the Egyptians and their beliefs. It seemed that the Persian tolerance of different religions and customs wasn't merely a political strategy, but a natural consequence of this interconnectedness, of this awareness that other ways of life existed, thrived even, beyond the empire's borders. He went on to tell me of a Zoroastrian priest he had met in Babylon, a Jewish merchant he had befriended in Tyre, and a Greek philosopher he had encountered in Ephesus. Each encounter seemed to have broadened his understanding of the world, enriched his perspective, and reinforced the idea that there was more than one way to view the world, more than one path to truth. "The great king is wise," the fisherman said, his voice thoughtful, "to allow the conquered peoples to keep their gods, their customs. It brings peace, but more than that, it brings understanding. We can learn much from each other, if only we are willing to listen." The marketplace, I realized, wasn't just a place of commerce. It was a melting pot of cultures, a hub of exchange where goods, ideas, and stories flowed freely. The fisherman's presence here, with his tales from distant lands and his collection of exotic goods, was a potent reminder that the world extended far beyond the confines of the Persian Empire, a testament to the interconnectedness of humanity, and a subtle affirmation of the empire's surprisingly inclusive nature. The spices, silks, and carvings weren't just commodities. They were ambassadors of different cultures, whispering tales of far-off lands and different ways of life. And in the heart of the empire, amidst the bustling energy of Pasargade's marketplace, these whispers found a receptive ear. The Persian Empire, it seemed, wasn't just conquering territories. It was absorbing the richness and diversity of the world, weaving it into its own unique cultural tapestry. The fisherman, a humble trader plying his trade, was a living embodiment of this process, a symbol of the empire's open embrace of the world beyond its walls. He offered me a cup of strong, sweet tea. "A blend from the mountains of India," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Try it. It will warm your soul." As I sipped the fragrant tea, the bustling sounds of the marketplace faded into the background. I was no longer just in Pasargadae, but somewhere beyond, carried on the currents of the fishermen's stories, sailing on the winds of trade and cultural exchange, glimpsing a world much larger, much more complex, and infinitely more fascinating than I had ever imagined. The dust settled on Cyrus's tomb, a monument not just to a man, but to an era. Pasargadae, the city he envisioned, breathed again, the rhythmic clang of hammers replacing the somber silence of morning. Construction resumed, the stonemasons picking up where they left off, carving intricate floral patterns into the palace walls, polishing the gleaming black stone of the king's private quarters. Yet a subtle shift permeated the air. The grand vision, the guiding hand, was gone. In its place was a new energy, a new direction, emanating from the young king, Cambyses. Cambyses, Cyrus's son, took the throne with an air of quiet confidence, a stark contrast to his father's boisterous charisma. He was a man of fewer words, his gaze sharp, his commands precise. The easy camaraderie that had defined Cyrus's court began to fade, replaced by a more formal, almost austere atmosphere. While respecting his father's legacy, Cambyses was determined to carve his own path, to build upon the foundation laid but mold it into something new, something distinctly his own. The focus of Pasargade's construction remained, but its spirit subtly altered. The grand audience hall, originally intended to host diplomatic gatherings, reflecting Cyrus's emphasis on peaceful alliances, now seemed to exude a more martial air, a sense of impending power projection. The change wasn't merely architectural. The whispers in the courtyard spoke of Cambyses' ambitions, whispers of expansion, of consolidating power, of conquests yet to come. The Persian Empire, under Cyrus, had been a rising sun, warming the lands with its benevolent glow. Under Cambyses, it felt like a gathering storm, powerful, unpredictable, its edges crackling with an electric anticipation. The anxieties, however, were as palpable as the excitement. Cyrus had woven a delicate tapestry of alliances, based on respect and mutual benefit. Would Cambyses, with his more direct, less diplomatic approach, unravel those carefully crafted threads? The conquered nations, who had, albeit reluctantly, accepted Cyrus's rule, now watched with wary eyes, wondering what this new king held in store for them. Would he continue his father's policy of tolerance and integration, or would his reign usher in an era of harsh subjugation? The empire's borders, once defined by negotiation and strategic alliances, now felt fluid, poised for expansion. Cambyses' gaze stretched beyond the existing territories, towards the rich lands of Egypt, a prize that had long tempted Persian rulers. Egypt, with its ancient civilization, its formidable pharaohs, its vast wealth, presented a challenge far greater than any Cyrus had faced. It was a test of strength, a gamble that could either elevate the Persian Empire to unprecedented heights or plunge it into a costly and debilitating war. The weight of the crown rested heavily on Cambyses' young shoulders. He understood the expectations, the legacy he had to uphold, and yet he seemed driven by an inner fire, a relentless ambition that set him apart from his father. Where Cyrus had been a shepherd, gathering disparate tribes under a single banner, Cambyses was a conqueror, eager to expand the flock, to extend his reach to the furthest corners of the known world. And amidst the swirling currents of political intrigue, military preparations, and looming conquests, a curious detail emerged, a glimpse into the personality of the new king. Cambyses, it was said, had a peculiar fondness for exotic animals, a passion that bordered on obsession. Lions, symbols of power and majesty, roamed the palace grounds, their roars echoing through the courtyards. Monkeys, chattering and mischievous, swung from the date palms, adding a touch of levity to the otherwise serious atmosphere. And then there was the crocodile, a Nile crocodile no less, housed in a specially constructed pool within the palace gardens. This menagerie was more than just a collection of curious creatures. It was a statement, a display of power and dominion. In a world where kings were often likened to gods, Cambyses' collection of exotic animals served as a living testament to his authority over the natural world. It was the ultimate status symbol, a declaration that he, like the gods, held sway over all creatures great and small. The lions represented his strength, the monkeys his playful nature, and the crocodile, perhaps, his connection to the land he coveted, Egypt. The people of Pasargadae, accustomed to the more down-to-earth demeanor of Cyrus, found their new king enigmatic, a mixture of awe-inspiring power and unsettling eccentricity. They watched his every move, trying to decipher the meaning behind his pronouncements, his gestures, his strange fascination with exotic beasts. They sensed a change in the wind, a shift in the very essence of their empire. The era of Cyrus, the shepherd king, was over. The era of Cambyses, the conqueror, had begun. The future of the Persian Empire, once a beacon of hope and tolerance, now hung precariously in the balance, poised on the edge of a new, uncertain chapter. The roar of the lions in the palace gardens seemed to echo the rumbling anxieties of an empire on the cusp of transformation. The dust of Pasargadae, still clinging to my robes, tasted of unfinished dreams. Cyrus's vision, the city he'd begun but never completed, was now abandoned for a new, bolder ambition. Cambyses, his son, had decreed it so. The royal stables, my domain, were to be uprooted, the horses readied for the long journey south to Persepolis. I watched the grooms, their faces etched with the same weary resignation as my own, lead the Nisaean chargers, their coats gleaming like polished ebony, towards the waiting transports. Each snort, each stamp of a hoof felt like a farewell to the quiet dignity of Pasargadae. We were leaving behind not just a city, but a whisper of a different future. The journey was long and arduous. The horses, accustomed to the open plains, chafed at the confinement, their anxious whinnies echoing in the dry air. We passed villages stripped bare by the demands of the new capital's construction, their inhabitants toiling under the relentless sun, a grim foreshadowing of what awaited us. I tried to shield the horses from the worst of it, offering them water, soothing their flanks with my touch, murmuring words of reassurance that I myself barely believed. Finally, the majestic outline of Persepolis emerged on the horizon, a shimmering mirage against the Zagros Mountains. As we drew closer, the scale of the city became breathtakingly apparent. Gigantic terraces carved into the mountainside, colossal statues of winged bulls guarding gateways, vast columns reaching for the sky. Persepolis dwarfed Pasargadae in every aspect. It was a city built not on dreams of peaceful coexistence, but on a foundation of conquest and absolute power. Passing through the city gates, we were swallowed by the controlled chaos of construction. Thousands of workers, a human tapestry of nationalities drawn from every corner of the empire, swarmed the site. Egyptian stonemasons, Median carpenters, Babylonian scribes, all toiling under the watchful eyes of Persian overseers. The air vibrated with the clang of hammers against stone, the creak of pulleys, the shouts of men directing the movement of colossal blocks. This was Persepolis, the city of the Persians, a monument to Cambyses' ambition, a physical embodiment of the empire's vast reach, and a stark reminder of its cost. The royal stables, newly constructed, were a pale imitation of the ones we'd left behind. They were grander, yes, and more opulent, but they lacked the quiet serenity of Pasargadae. Here, the air thrummed with the unspoken pressures of courtly life, the constant vying for favor, the whispers of intrigue. Even the horses seemed to sense it, their movements more restless, their eyes reflecting the unease that permeated the city. I witnessed the Apadana's construction firsthand. Its sheer size was staggering, a vast platform raised high above the surrounding city, reached by monumental staircases adorned with intricate reliefs. The audience hall itself, still taking shape, promised to be a marvel. I saw the workers meticulously placing the colossal stone columns, each one seemingly taller than the tallest cedar in Lebanon. The roof, yet to be completed, would eventually be supported by these towering pillars, creating a space so vast it could house thousands. Cambyses' vision was clear: to create a hall that could contain representatives from every satrapy, every conquered nation, a physical manifestation of Persia's dominion over the known world. The reliefs carved into the staircases told a story of their own. They depicted processions of tribute-bearers, their hands laden with gifts from distant lands. Lydians in their brightly colored robes, Egyptians with their shaven heads and intricate headdresses, Babylonians with their flowing beards and richly embroidered garments, all converging on the Apadana, bowing before the Persian king. It was a carefully crafted narrative of submission, a visual reminder of the empire's might. As I watched the city rise around me, a sense of unease settled in my heart. The magnificence of Persepolis was undeniable, its grandeur awe-inspiring. But unlike Pasargadae, which had felt like a nascent dream, Persepolis felt like a declaration, a boast. It was a city built not to inspire, but to intimidate. The sheer scale of it, the opulence, the constant reminders of power and conquest. It all felt oppressive. I wondered if this new capital, born from ambition and fueled by the empire's resources, would ultimately prove to be its undoing. The horses, sensing my unease, nuzzled their heads against me, their silent comfort a welcome respite in the heart of this overwhelming city. In their familiar presence, I found a flicker of solace, a reminder of the simpler world we'd left behind. The future of Persepolis and of the empire it represented remained unwritten, but in the soft eyes of my horses I saw not grandeur, but a quiet plea for peace. The last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of burnt orange and deep violet. From my perch atop the royal stables of Persepolis, I watched the spectacle unfold, the cool evening air a welcome balm against my aging skin. Below, the city pulsed with a life that felt both familiar and distant. The clatter of carts, the murmur of voices, the distant strains of music. These were the sounds of an empire at its zenith, a symphony of stone and ambition. The horses in the stables beneath me shifted restlessly, their warm breath rising in plumes of vapor. They were settled for the night, their powerful legs still after a day's work, their coats gleaming under the nascent starlight. I knew each one by name, their personalities as varied as the landscapes we'd traversed. I've seen more sunsets than I can count, more than most men see in 10 lifetimes. I've seen kings rise and fall, their reigns marked by triumphs and tragedies etched in the very stone of this city. I've watched cities built on the backs of dreams, only to crumble into dust, swallowed by the relentless march of time. I've seen the ebb and flow of power, the fickle nature of fortune, the fleeting dance of life and death. And I've smelled things I'd rather forget. The stench of battlefields, the cloying sweetness of decay, the acrid bite of burning cities. These are the phantom scents that cling to the edges of my memory, a grim reminder of the darker corners of this world. My mind drifted back to Pasargadae, a place of quiet serenity nestled amongst the rolling hills. I remember the gardens bursting with life, the air thick with the fragrance of jasmine and roses. I remember Cyrus, his vision of a unified Persia shimmering in his eyes, a dream that took root and blossomed into an empire that spanned continents. His words, echoes of a bygone era, still resonated within me, a testament to the enduring power of a single man's ambition. I was there, a young man then, full of vigor and hope, tending to the royal steeds, witnessing the birth of a nation. From those humble beginnings, I watched the empire expand, its borders stretching beyond even the wildest dreams of its founder. A world forged in the thunder of horse hooves and the unwavering strength of Persian stone. I rode with the armies, the dust of 1,000 battlefields clinging to my clothes, the cries of men ringing in my ears. I witnessed the conquests, the annexations, the relentless push eastward, southward, westward, a tide of Persian might washing over the known world. I've crossed deserts shimmering under the merciless sun, navigated treacherous mountain passes, and forded rivers swollen with meltwater. I've seen the glittering sands of Egypt, the snow-capped peaks of the Caucasus, the fertile plains of Mesopotamia. Each journey, each new land, etched itself onto my soul, a tapestry woven with threads of adventure, hardship, and the unwavering companionship of my horses. Now, as the stars began to glimmer in the darkening sky, casting their ethereal glow over the Persian plains, a deep sense of peace settled over me. The horses below me breathed deeply, their rhythmic sighs a lullaby that eased the aches in my old bones. The city below, a vibrant tapestry of light and shadow, slowly began to quiet, its frenetic energy fading into the stillness of night. The cool night air, fragrant with the scent of cedar and cypress, caressed my face, a gentle reminder of the enduring beauty of this land. I leaned back against the rough stone wall of the stable roof, my weary body sinking into the familiar comfort. There were no more journeys for tonight, no more horses to tend. My days of riding across vast empires, of witnessing the rise and fall of kings, were behind me. The weight of years of countless miles traversed settled upon me, not as a burden, but as a comforting blanket. Tonight, there was only the soft whisper of the wind, the gentle rhythm of horses breathing, and the distant, almost ethereal whispers of Pasargadae, a place that held the echoes of a dream, a vision of unity that once ignited the heart of an empire. Tonight, there was only the vast expanse of the night sky, studded with 1,000,000 twinkling stars, a silent testament to the enduring passage of time. Tonight, there was only sleep, a welcome respite from the memories and the miles, a promise of quiet oblivion until the dawn broke over Persepolis once more. Good night.